Aaliyah woke up early that morning, the sun barely stretching its light across the quiet streets outside. She had worked at the luxury resort for nearly 3 years, and over time, she had learned to anticipate the rhythm of the day. The mornings were usually calm, with only a few guests lingering over breakfast, but she knew that by mid-morning, the restaurant would fill with tourists and wealthy visitors who expected perfect service. As she brushed her hair and prepared for work, she reminded herself to stay calm, patient, and focused. Every day was a new challenge, but she had always believed that her hard work and professionalism would carry her through even the toughest moments. By the time she arrived at the resort, the lobby was already buzzing with activity. Guests walked in with bright smiles and cameras, excited for their holiday, while staff hurriedly moved to meet their needs. Aaliyah slipped into her crisp uniform, adjusted her apron, and checked her station. She liked the orderliness of the restaurant, the polished tables, the neatly folded napkins, and the soft hum of conversation. To her, it was a place of beauty and precision, a place where her careful attention to detail mattered. As she began her first rounds, greeting each table with a warm smile, Aaliyah noticed how different the guests could be. Some were cheerful and polite, offering friendly conversation that made her work enjoyable. Others, however, were demanding and impatient, expecting more than what she could give, often without realizing how much effort went into serving them. She had learned to handle each guest with professionalism, letting kindness and calmness guide her responses even when faced with rudeness. It was around 10 in the morning when the restaurant door opened and in walked Miranda. She was immediately noticeable, tall, dressed in designer clothes, with an air of authority that seemed to demand attention. She carried herself with a confidence that bordered on arrogance, and her eyes scanned the room as if evaluating everything and everyone. Aaliyah had seen guests like Miranda before, people who believed that money gave them the right to treat others poorly. She took a deep breath and reminded herself to stay calm, as she approached the table with her usual polite greeting. "Good morning, welcome to our resort restaurant. My name is Aaliyah, and I'll be taking care of you today," she said, her voice steady and professional. Miranda barely looked at her, waving her hand as if to dismiss the introduction. She gestured for her party to sit, and the table erupted with conversation as Aaliyah began taking drink orders. She moved smoothly from one chair to the next, jotting down each request and repeating it back to ensure accuracy. Despite Miranda's dismissive glance, Aaliyah maintained her composure, keeping her smile polite and calm. However, it quickly became clear that Miranda was not the kind of guest who would be satisfied with polite service alone. She began to make small remarks that seemed innocent at first but carried an undertone of criticism. "Are you sure this is the fastest way to bring our drinks?" she asked in a tone that suggested disbelief. Aaliyah nodded, offering reassurance that everything would be served promptly. "Yes, ma'am. I'll make sure your drinks are brought right away." She moved on, trying to ignore the sharp glance that followed her steps. As she carried the tray to another table, she felt Miranda's eyes on her, scrutinizing every movement. Aaliyah tried not to let it bother her. She had learned that some guests thrived on intimidation, using their wealth and social status to control situations. She reminded herself that her professionalism was her strongest shield. Still, there was a tension in the air that made her heart beat a little faster. Miranda's group laughed loudly, clearly enjoying the attention they drew from the restaurant staff. It was one of those moments when Aaliyah felt invisible yet painfully exposed at the same time. Things escalated when Aaliyah returned to Miranda's table with the drinks. She carefully placed each glass before the guests, making sure not to spill a drop. Miranda leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms, and studied Aaliyah as if trying to find fault. "You know, I've been to many restaurants around the world, and I must say, the service here is different," she said slowly, each word dripping with condescension. Aaliyah smiled politely, nodding. "We strive to give our guests the best experience possible, ma'am. Is there anything else I can bring for you right now?" she asked, keeping her tone neutral and calm. Miranda's laughter rang out suddenly, loud enough to draw the attention of nearby tables. "You're so polite. It's almost like you're trying too hard," she said, her voice carrying an edge. Aaliyah felt a small knot form in her stomach, but she didn't respond. She reminded herself that engaging in argument would only make the situation worse. She turned to leave, placing the empty tray on the counter and quickly returning to her next task. Still, the sting of humiliation lingered in her mind. She had faced difficult guests before, but Miranda's behavior felt sharper, more intentional, as if she was trying to break Aaliyah's confidence. The morning continued, and Aaliyah worked diligently, serving guests and keeping an eye on Miranda's table. The wealthy woman's remarks became increasingly pointed. She criticized the menu choices, the way Aaliyah carried the trays, even the angle at which the glasses were placed. Each comment was a test, and Aaliyah endured them silently, refusing to let anger or fear take control. Her colleagues whispered words of encouragement when they could, knowing that she was under immense pressure. The restaurant was a stage, and Aaliyah was performing a delicate balance of patience, professionalism, and composure. At one point, Miranda stood up suddenly, pointing at a chair. "This chair is uncomfortable. Bring me another one, and make it quick," she demanded. Aaliyah moved quickly to comply, carefully replacing the chair and ensuring that the table was back in perfect order. Her hands shook slightly, though she refused to show it. Inside, she felt a growing determination not to let anyone humiliate her. She reminded herself that her value was not defined by Miranda's opinions or insults. Despite the growing tension, Aaliyah found moments to reflect on why she loved her job. She enjoyed making guests feel welcome, seeing the joy on families' faces, and taking pride in a restaurant that represented excellence. These thoughts helped her stay grounded even as Miranda's behavior became more aggressive. Aaliyah knew that losing control could escalate the situation, but staying composed was a form of quiet resistance. She held onto her dignity like a shield, protecting herself against humiliation. As the morning passed, Miranda's remarks escalated further, and the atmosphere at the table became more hostile. Aaliyah's patience was tested in ways she had never experienced before. She felt her heart race and her hands tighten around the tray, but she reminded herself that she had endured challenges before. Each time Miranda raised her voice or made a cutting remark, Aaliyah breathed slowly and responded with calm professionalism. It was not easy, and she often felt a mixture of fear and anger, but she refused to let Miranda see her break. By late morning, the restaurant was crowded, and the staff were moving quickly to keep up with the orders. Aaliyah glanced around and noticed that other guests were starting to whisper, some looking uncomfortable at the tension at Miranda's table. Aaliyah felt a mixture of pride and anxiety. Pride because she was handling the situation with grace, and anxiety because she knew that any wrong move could escalate things further. Still, she pressed on, determined to do her job well and maintain her dignity. As she walked past the counter to refill drinks, Aaliyah felt a tap on her shoulder. She turned, seeing one of her colleagues give her a small nod of encouragement. It was a silent message, "You're doing the right thing. Keep going." That simple gesture reminded Aaliyah that she was not alone, that she had support even in moments of isolation. It strengthened her resolve, giving her the courage to face Miranda's growing hostility without losing her composure. The morning moved forward, each moment building the tension like a storm waiting to break. Aaliyah continued to serve with grace, smiling politely, speaking softly, and maintaining an unwavering professionalism that few could match. She knew that soon, a moment would come when the situation could no longer be ignored, when the confrontation would reach a turning point. And though she did not yet know what form that moment would take, she felt ready to meet it, armed with dignity, courage, and the knowledge that her worth was never defined by anyone else's cruelty. The morning had passed, and the restaurant was now fully alive with activity. The chatter of guests, clinking of cutlery, and soft background music filled the air, but Aaliyah felt a heavy tension whenever she approached Miranda's table. The wealthy woman's behavior had grown bolder, her words sharper, and her tone colder. Aaliyah had served many difficult guests in her career, but there was something different about Miranda. It was as if she took pleasure in testing limits, seeing how far she could push a person before they lost their composure. Aaliyah tried to remind herself that this was not personal. Miranda's actions reflected her own arrogance, not Aaliyah's worth. Miranda's friends laughed at every small comment she made, encouraging her behavior without thinking about the impact it had on the staff. Aaliyah felt the weight of the restaurant's gaze on her, noticing some guests whispering and glancing in their direction. She could feel the scrutiny, but she refused to let it rattle her. She focused on her breathing, keeping her movements precise and calm, hoping that professionalism alone could defuse the situation. She placed another drink on the table and stepped back, smiling politely. "Here's your lemonade, ma'am, and your iced tea for your friend. Is there anything else I can get for you right now?" she asked. Miranda looked at her as if she were invisible, then snapped her fingers sharply. "No, no, you don't understand. I said I wanted fresh lemon slices." "Not this," she exclaimed, waving her hand toward the glass. Aaliyah felt a flash of anger, but she swallowed it immediately. She nodded calmly. "Of course, ma'am. I'll bring fresh lemon slices right away." She turned quickly to prepare the request, her hands steady despite the heat rising in her chest. While Aaliyah was away, she could hear Miranda's voice carrying across the restaurant. "Honestly, they don't know what they're doing here. I've had better service in much smaller places," she said loudly, laughing in a way that drew attention from nearby tables. Some guests looked uncomfortable, while others simply pretended not to notice. Aaliyah returned with the lemon slices, trying to remain composed, but she could feel her heart beating faster. Each insult felt like a small weight pressing down on her, a reminder that her dignity was being challenged in front of strangers. She set the fresh slices carefully on the tray and approached the table. "Here you are, ma'am. Fresh lemon slices as requested," she said, keeping her voice calm and polite. Miranda leaned forward and, without warning, jabbed her finger at Aaliyah's chest. "Watch how you serve me. Do you always move this slowly?" she demanded. Aaliyah felt the heat of embarrassment rise, but she refused to respond with anger. She stood tall, met Miranda's gaze, and said, "I'm making sure everything is perfect for you, ma'am. I'll be right back with any additional items you need." Miranda's friends giggled at her comments, encouraging her behavior, and Aaliyah felt the room shrinking around her. Every step she took toward the kitchen was heavy with tension, every movement watched. She poured herself a quick glass of water and took a slow breath to calm her nerves. She knew she had to maintain her composure, but the humiliation burned inside her like a quiet fire. She had endured verbal criticism before, but the deliberate, public nature of Miranda's actions made her feel exposed and powerless in a way she rarely experienced. Returning to the table with another round of drinks, Aaliyah tried to anticipate Miranda's next demand. She placed the tray down carefully, ensuring that every glass and plate was positioned perfectly. Miranda immediately leaned back, frowned, and crossed her arms. "This is not arranged properly," she said, her tone sharp. "Do you even know how to serve properly?" The words hit Aaliyah like a slap, and she felt her face tighten. She forced herself to take a slow breath, nodding politely. "I apologize, ma'am. I'll fix it right away." She moved the glasses slightly, aligning them with the edge of the table. The tension in the room had grown so thick that some guests had begun to glance over curiously. Aaliyah could feel the judgment in their eyes, and it made her feel both vulnerable and determined. She was no stranger to hard work or public scrutiny, but the combination of Miranda's verbal attacks and the laughter of her friends made her feel humiliated in a way she had never felt before. Each word, each gesture, seemed designed to undermine her confidence, to make her question her competence despite years of experience. Then, things took a sudden turn. As Aaliyah bent slightly to adjust the placement of a glass, Miranda reached across the table and slapped her arm sharply. The unexpected contact sent a jolt of shock through Aaliyah's body. The room seemed to quiet for a moment as other guests noticed the action, some looking horrified. Aaliyah froze, unsure of how to react immediately. Her mind raced, trying to decide whether to respond with words or to retreat to safety. Miranda's face twisted into a smirk, clearly expecting Aaliyah to shrink under the attack. "That's how slow you move. Maybe this will teach you to pay attention," she said, her voice dripping with arrogance. Aaliyah felt a mixture of fear and anger. Her first instinct was to pull away, to protect herself, but she also knew that showing fear might only encourage further abuse. Instead, she took a slow, steadying breath, feeling her determination harden. "I'm here to do my job and serve all guests with respect, ma'am," Aaliyah said firmly, her voice calm but resolute. "I won't allow anyone to treat me disrespectfully." The words surprised Miranda, who had clearly expected submission rather than a quiet assertion of dignity. The other guests and staff around the table watched closely, sensing that something significant was unfolding. Aaliyah stepped back, creating space between herself and Miranda. The wealthy woman's friends murmured, confused by Aaliyah's lack of fear. They had assumed that their mockery and aggression would intimidate her, but instead, she had met it with calm firmness. Miranda's expression flickered, a hint of shock and disbelief appearing on her face. She had not anticipated that someone she viewed as inferior would stand their ground so resolutely. The manager of the restaurant, who had been observing from a distance, approached cautiously. "Is everything all right here?" he asked, his voice professional but concerned. Aaliyah nodded politely, explaining briefly that she had been struck but that she had handled it calmly. Miranda, still startled by Aaliyah's response, struggled to maintain her composure. She had never encountered anyone in her world of privilege who dared to assert themselves in such a direct yet controlled way. Aaliyah felt a surge of relief knowing that help was nearby, but she also felt a quiet pride in herself. She had endured verbal humiliation, public criticism, and even physical aggression, yet she had maintained her dignity. Her mind replayed the morning's events, each moment of tension, each insult, and each act of defiance strengthening her resolve. She realized that while the world could be harsh, she had an inner strength that no one could take away. The manager asked Miranda and her group to calm down, subtly signaling that the staff would not tolerate abuse. Guests nearby whispered among themselves, some expressing sympathy for Aaliyah, others silently acknowledging her courage. Despite the lingering tension, Aaliyah returned to her duties, her steps measured and her smile unwavering. She knew that the morning was far from over and that maintaining her composure was still crucial. Yet inside, a fire had been lit. The humiliation she had endured fueled a determination to assert her worth and never allow anyone to diminish her dignity. She moved gracefully between tables, serving drinks and food with precision, each action a testament to her professionalism. She knew that the day would continue to present challenges, but she also understood that she had proven something vital not just to Miranda or her colleagues, but to herself. She had shown that respect and strength were not dictated by wealth, status, or power. As the morning drew toward noon, Aaliyah felt a mixture of exhaustion and empowerment. The experience had been draining, but it had also reinforced her resilience. She realized that in life, people would try to push boundaries, belittle others, or assert dominance, but true strength came from maintaining one's dignity, even in the face of injustice. And though she knew that Miranda's behavior might escalate further, Aaliyah felt ready to face whatever came next with courage, calmness, and a clear understanding of her own value. By early afternoon, the restaurant was filled with a steady flow of guests. The chatter of conversations, laughter, and clinking cutlery created a lively atmosphere, but for Aaliyah, the tension at Miranda's table lingered like a heavy cloud. Every time she approached, Miranda's sharp gaze seemed to pierce through her, silently daring her to falter. Aaliyah had endured the morning with patience and professionalism, but she knew that the situation was reaching a critical point. The calm that had existed earlier was now gone, replaced by a sense that something significant was about to happen. Aaliyah moved carefully from table to table, delivering food and drinks with precision, all the while keeping an eye on Miranda. The wealthy woman's friends whispered and laughed among themselves, occasionally glancing at Aaliyah with amusement. Each small remark or action from Miranda seemed designed to provoke her, to see if she could break her composure. Aaliyah felt her pulse quicken, not out of fear, but from the anticipation of what might come next. She reminded herself to stay calm, to focus on her training, and to respond only with dignity and control. As she approached Miranda's table with a tray of drinks, the woman suddenly leaned forward, her voice loud enough for nearby guests to hear. "I asked for sparkling water, not this. How hard can it be to get a simple drink right?" The words were harsh, intended to humiliate. Aaliyah kept her expression neutral, placing the drinks carefully on the table. "I apologize, ma'am. I'll bring the sparkling water immediately," she said politely, her tone calm and steady. Despite the insult, she refused to let anger or fear show. Miranda's eyes narrowed, clearly expecting a reaction. Instead of shrinking, Aaliyah stood tall, maintaining her composure. Her colleagues, who had been watching from a distance, could see her determination. She was handling the situation with a quiet strength that made it clear she would not be intimidated. Aaliyah reminded herself that her dignity was hers to protect, and no amount of condescension or mockery could take it away. Then, in a sudden and shocking move, Miranda reached out and struck Aaliyah across the arm. The slap was unexpected and sent a jolt through her body. Aaliyah froze for a moment, the sting sharp and immediate. The surrounding guests gasped, some leaning forward in surprise, while others whispered among themselves. It was one thing to endure verbal humiliation, but physical aggression crossed a line. Aaliyah felt a rush of adrenaline, her heart pounding, but she forced herself to stay calm. Miranda leaned back in her chair, smirking, clearly expecting Aaliyah to react with fear or submission. "That should teach you to pay attention," she said, her tone full of arrogance. Aaliyah's mind raced, considering her options. She could retreat, call for assistance, or respond in self-defense. She knew that losing control could escalate the situation, but remaining passive in the face of aggression also felt wrong. She took a slow, deep breath, grounding herself, and prepared to respond. With a calm but firm voice, Aaliyah said, "I will not allow anyone to treat me disrespectfully. I am here to do my job, and I expect to be treated with dignity." Her words surprised Miranda, who had clearly assumed that Aaliyah would cower or apologize excessively. The surrounding guests and staff watched closely, sensing that the balance of power was shifting. Aaliyah's quiet confidence was a stark contrast to Miranda's aggression, and it became clear that she would not be intimidated. Miranda's friends began to murmur among themselves, some showing confusion, others looking slightly embarrassed. They had expected Aaliyah to react with fear or anger, but her calm assertiveness caught them off guard. The manager of the restaurant, who had been monitoring the situation, approached carefully. "Ma'am, please step back. We cannot allow physical contact with staff," he said, his voice professional but firm. Miranda's face flickered with irritation, but she reluctantly leaned back, still smirking as if testing boundaries. Aaliyah felt a surge of relief knowing that support was nearby, but she also felt pride in herself. She had faced humiliation, verbal attacks, and physical aggression, yet she had maintained her dignity. Her colleagues whispered words of encouragement as they passed by, some offering silent nods of approval. It was a small but meaningful reminder that she was not alone and that her strength had been noticed. Despite the confrontation, Aaliyah returned to her duties, moving between tables with precision and care. She delivered meals, refilled drinks, and ensured that other guests felt attended to. But in her mind, the morning's events replayed over and over. Each insult, Each jab, each attempt at humiliation had tested her patience and composure. Yet, instead of breaking her, it had strengthened her resolve. She realized that her professionalism and calmness were her greatest weapons, and no amount of arrogance or cruelty could take them from her. As the afternoon progressed, Miranda's behavior continued to escalate. She made sharp remarks about Aaliyah's movements, her tone, even the way she carried the tray. Guests nearby began to notice the tension, some looking uncomfortable, others simply watching silently. Aaliyah felt the eyes of the restaurant upon her, a mixture of curiosity, judgment, and sympathy. She reminded herself to focus on her work, to maintain her composure, and to handle each moment with care. Then, without warning, Miranda leaned forward again, this time striking Aaliyah more forcefully. The sound of the slap echoed slightly in the busy restaurant, drawing immediate attention. Aaliyah felt the sting burn through her arm, and for a brief moment, she felt a flash of fear. But the fear was quickly replaced by determination. She would not allow this behavior to continue. She would not let anyone make her feel small or powerless. She stood her ground, meeting Miranda's gaze with steady eyes. In a controlled, deliberate motion, Aaliyah stepped back slightly and raised her hand in a non-threatening gesture. "Enough," she said firmly, her voice calm but carrying authority. "This behavior is unacceptable. I will not be struck or humiliated. I am here to do my job, and I deserve to be treated with respect." Her words were measured, but they carried weight. The surrounding guests and staff could feel the shift in energy. For the first time, Miranda looked unsure, her smirk faltering as she realized that Aaliyah would not back down. The restaurant manager quickly moved closer, signaling that he would handle the situation. "Ma'am, please calm down. We cannot allow physical aggression in our restaurant," he said. Miranda's friends looked uneasy, sensing that the situation was no longer under their control. Aaliyah felt a sense of quiet satisfaction. She had stood up for herself without resorting to anger or retaliation, demonstrating strength and courage in a difficult moment. Even as the confrontation began to subside, Aaliyah knew that the incident would leave a lasting impact. She felt a mix of emotions, anger at being struck, pride in her response, and a deep understanding of her own resilience. She realized that standing up for herself had not only protected her dignity but had also set an example for others. The staff whispered quietly, expressing admiration for her courage. Guests who had witnessed the incident offered subtle gestures of support, nodding or smiling in acknowledgement. As Aaliyah continued her work, she reflected on the morning's events. She thought about the power dynamics at play, the courage it took to stand up against aggression, and the importance of maintaining one's dignity in the face of adversity. She understood that life would present challenges, moments when others might try to humiliate or intimidate her. But she also knew that she had the strength to face these challenges with calmness, professionalism, and self-respect. By mid-afternoon, the restaurant had settled into a steady rhythm. Guests enjoyed their meals, conversations flowed, and the staff worked efficiently. Aaliyah moved gracefully among the tables, her actions precise and calm. Yet, beneath the surface, she carried the lessons of the confrontation. She had learned that strength was not always loud or aggressive, sometimes, it was quiet, steady, and unwavering. She had learned that dignity could not be taken by words or actions alone, it was something she protected herself. As the shift continued, Aaliyah noticed subtle changes in the behavior of those around her. Some guests approached with more respect, aware of the tension earlier in the day. Her colleagues moved with renewed confidence, inspired by her example. Even Miranda, though still seated at her table, seemed less certain, her previously dominant demeanor softened by the realization that she could not control or intimidate Aaliyah. The balance of power had shifted, not through anger or retaliation, but through calm, firm self-respect. Aaliyah felt a quiet sense of empowerment. She had endured humiliation, verbal attacks, and physical aggression, yet she had maintained her composure. She had proven to herself that her strength was not dependent on the approval of others, that her dignity was inherent and could not be taken away. As she moved through the restaurant, serving guests and managing her station, she carried that sense of inner strength with her. By the time the afternoon was ending, Aaliyah knew that the day had changed her in ways she could not yet fully understand. She had faced a challenge that tested her patience, courage, and professionalism, and she had emerged stronger. She understood that life would continue to present obstacles, but she also knew that she had the ability to face them with dignity and resilience. And in that knowledge, she found a deep sense of peace and empowerment. The afternoon slowly turned into evening, and the busy hum of the restaurant began to settle into a quieter rhythm. Guests lingered over their meals, some chatting softly, others simply enjoying the ambience of the resort. For Aaliyah, the events of the day weighed heavily on her mind. Though the immediate confrontation with Miranda had ended, the sting of humiliation and physical aggression lingered. She moved through the restaurant with her usual grace and professionalism, serving guests and clearing tables, but inside, her thoughts replayed every moment. Each insult, each jab, each slap seemed to echo, reminding her of the challenge she had faced. Yet, along with the sting of the incident came a growing sense of pride. Aaliyah realized that despite everything, she had remained composed. She had faced verbal attacks and physical aggression without resorting to anger or retaliation. Her words had been firm but calm, her actions measured and precise. She had stood her ground, protecting her dignity and asserting her self-respect in a moment that could have easily broken someone less determined. That realization brought her a quiet sense of empowerment, a reminder that strength often lay in calm persistence rather than confrontation. Her colleagues, who had witnessed the events earlier in the day, quietly approached her during brief moments between tasks. Some offered supportive smiles, others whispered words of encouragement. "You handled that so well," one co-worker said, shaking her head in admiration. "I don't know if I could have stayed that calm." Aaliyah nodded politely, appreciating their support but remaining focused on her duties. She knew that the restaurant required constant attention, and she could not afford to let her emotions interfere with her work. Yet the acknowledgement from her peers reminded her that she was not alone and that her strength had been noticed. The manager, who had stepped in during the confrontation, approached her later when the restaurant had fewer guests. "Aaliyah, I want to thank you for handling that situation with such professionalism," he said sincerely. "No one should ever be treated like that, and you stood your ground without escalating the situation. That took courage." Aaliyah felt a mixture of relief and pride. She had been worried about the manager's perception, unsure if standing up to a guest would be seen as inappropriate. Hearing his words reassured her that she had done the right thing. Meanwhile, Miranda and her group were finishing their meal. The wealthy woman seemed unsettled, her previous arrogance softened by the realization that she had lost control over the situation. Her friends whispered nervously, glancing at Aaliyah and the staff with uncertainty. The power dynamics had shifted, and for the first time that day, Miranda seemed aware that her behavior had consequences. The manager had discreetly informed her that her actions were unacceptable and that the resort maintained a strict policy against mistreatment of staff. Though she tried to maintain a facade of composure, the tension was visible in her posture and expressions. Aaliyah reflected on the encounter as she continued her work. She realized that humiliation, when met with dignity, lost much of its power. Miranda's attempts to dominate and belittle had failed because Aaliyah refused to give them authority over her sense of self. She thought about the lessons the day had taught her: patience, composure, courage, and the importance of asserting boundaries. She understood that in life, people would sometimes test limits, but how one responded could make all the difference. She had chosen a response that maintained her integrity, and in doing so, she had not only protected herself but also set an example for others. As the restaurant emptied and the evening sun cast long shadows across the tables, Aaliyah had a chance to reflect more deeply. She thought about the emotional toll of the day, the moments of fear, anger, and humiliation, and how she had transformed those feelings into determination and calm. She realized that resilience was not simply about enduring hardship but about responding to it with strength and self-respect. Each interaction, each insult, and each challenge had strengthened her ability to remain composed under pressure. The staff gathered briefly at the end of their shift to debrief. Many expressed admiration for how Aaliyah had handled Miranda's behavior. "You showed us all how to stand up without losing control," one colleague said. "That was inspiring." Aaliyah felt humbled but also validated. She knew that the day's events would stay with her for some time, but the recognition from her peers helped transform the experience from one of humiliation into a moment of empowerment. As she cleaned her station and prepared to leave, Aaliyah noticed small gestures from the guests she had served. A few nodded in respect, some offered polite smiles, and others quietly expressed appreciation for her professionalism. These gestures reminded her that while some people could be cruel and disrespectful, many valued kindness, respect, and dignity. It reinforced her belief that maintaining composure and self-respect was always worthwhile, even when facing unjust treatment. The events of the day also prompted conversations among the staff about workplace safety and support. They discussed strategies for handling difficult guests and ways to protect each other while maintaining professionalism. Aaliyah contributed her thoughts, emphasizing the importance of calm assertiveness and clear communication. Her experience became a learning moment for the team, highlighting how courage and dignity could influence not only one person but the entire work environment. Later, at home, Aaliyah took time to reflect privately. She thought about the anger and embarrassment she had felt, and she allowed herself to acknowledge those emotions without judgment. She understood that it was natural to feel upset after being mistreated, but she also recognized the strength she had shown in responding calmly and firmly. Writing in her journal, she recorded the events of the day, noting how she had stood her ground and the lessons she had learned about dignity, courage, and resilience. Aaliyah also thought about the broader implications of the incident. She realized that moments of injustice could happen anywhere, at work, in public, or even in private interactions. The way one responded could influence outcomes and leave a lasting impact on both oneself and others. By choosing calm assertiveness and protecting her dignity, she had not only defended herself but also sent a clear message that mistreatment was unacceptable. As evening turned to night, Aaliyah felt a sense of closure. While the confrontation with Miranda had been difficult and emotionally taxing, it had also been transformative. She had learned to trust her instincts, to assert boundaries, and to recognize her own strength. She understood that challenges were a part of life, but so was the ability to meet them with composure and courage. The experience had strengthened her sense of self-worth and reinforced her commitment to professionalism and integrity. In the days that followed, the resort implemented subtle but meaningful changes. Staff received additional training on handling difficult guests, and the management made it clear that abuse toward employees would not be tolerated. Miranda, meanwhile, faced formal warnings and restrictions on her interactions at the resort. The consequences of her actions became a quiet reminder that behavior had accountability, and that standing up for oneself was both necessary and powerful. Aaliyah continued her work with renewed confidence. Each day she moved through the restaurant with calm assurance, serving guests efficiently and gracefully. The memory of the incident remained, but it no longer carried the weight of humiliation. Instead, it became a symbol of her resilience, her courage, and her ability to maintain dignity in the face of adversity. She knew that life would continue to present challenges, but she also knew that she had the strength to face them. Her colleagues continued to express admiration for her courage, and Aaliyah felt a sense of community and support that strengthened her further. She realized that strength was not only about standing up for oneself in the moment but also about inspiring others through calm, firm action. Her experience became a quiet source of empowerment, not just for herself but for those around her. Reflecting on the day's events, Aaliyah understood that true resilience came from a combination of courage, calmness, and self-respect. She had faced humiliation, verbal attacks, and physical aggression, yet she had emerged stronger, more confident, and more aware of her own worth. The experience had taught her that dignity could not be taken by others, it was something that came from within and that one had the power to protect. By the time she left the resort that night, Aaliyah felt a deep sense of peace. She had faced one of the most challenging moments of her career and had handled it with strength and composure. She walked home with her head held high, carrying not only the lessons of the day but also a renewed sense of self-worth. The incident with Miranda, though painful, had become a defining moment, a reminder that courage, dignity, and calm resilience could overcome even the most difficult challenges. The following morning, Aaliyah arrived at the resort with a mixture of anticipation and calm determination. She knew the previous day had changed her in ways she was only beginning to understand. Though the memory of Miranda's harsh words and physical aggression still lingered in her mind, it no longer carried the weight of humiliation. Instead, it had become a reminder of her resilience, her courage, and her ability to face adversity with dignity. She took a deep breath as she walked into the lobby, letting the familiar sounds of the resort, the soft music, the chatter of guests, and the quiet footsteps of staff wash over her. The staff greeted her with warm smiles and encouraging words. Many had been thinking about the events of the day before, reflecting on how Aaliyah had handled a challenging and public confrontation. Some whispered quietly about how they had been inspired by her calm assertiveness, while others simply nodded, their expressions filled with admiration. For Aaliyah, the support of her colleagues reinforced the sense that she was part of a team that valued respect, courage, and professionalism. It reminded her that even in difficult moments, she was not alone. The manager approached her as she prepared her station. "Good morning, Aaliyah," he said warmly. "I want to thank you again for the way you handled the situation yesterday. The resort has received feedback from several guests who witnessed it, and they expressed admiration for your composure and professionalism. It's clear that you set an example for everyone here." Aaliyah felt a mixture of relief and pride. She had faced an incredibly stressful situation, and hearing that her actions had made a positive impression reinforced the importance of maintaining dignity under pressure. Miranda had not returned to the restaurant that morning, and the staff quietly speculated about her absence. The manager explained that she had been formally warned about her behavior and that her privileges at the resort had been restricted. There were clear consequences for her actions, and the staff felt a sense of relief knowing that the resort had taken the situation seriously. Aaliyah, while pleased that justice had been served, did not feel any sense of triumph over Miranda. Instead, she focused on the lessons she had learned and the personal growth she had achieved through the experience. As the morning progressed, the restaurant began to fill with guests once again. Families, couples, and solo travelers moved through the space, enjoying meals and conversation. Aaliyah carried out her duties with renewed confidence, moving gracefully between tables, delivering food and drinks with precision, and engaging with guests in a warm and professional manner. Each interaction reminded her of the strength that came from maintaining composure and dignity, even when faced with difficult circumstances. Throughout the day, Aaliyah reflected on the personal impact of the incident with Miranda. She realized that standing up for herself had not only protected her dignity but also strengthened her sense of self-worth. She had learned that courage could take many forms, not always loud or aggressive, but sometimes quiet, steady, and unwavering. By asserting her boundaries calmly and professionally, she had demonstrated that respect is not something granted by others but something one claims for oneself. Her colleagues continued to offer encouragement and support. Some shared their own experiences with difficult guests, and together they discussed strategies for handling similar situations in the future. Aaliyah listened attentively, contributing her thoughts on the importance of calm assertiveness and clear communication. The discussion was empowering, creating a sense of unity among the staff and reinforcing the idea that they could rely on each other in challenging moments. As the afternoon approached, a few guests who had witnessed the confrontation the day before returned to the restaurant. They approached Aaliyah and expressed their admiration for the way she had handled the situation. "You were amazing yesterday," One guest said with a warm smile. "I've never seen someone stay so calm and composed under such pressure. It was inspiring." Aaliyah thanked them politely, feeling a deep sense of validation. The recognition from strangers reinforced her understanding that her actions had meaning beyond the immediate situation. Even as the day went on, Aaliyah noticed subtle changes in the atmosphere of the restaurant. Guests seemed more aware of the staff, treating them with increased respect and consideration. The staff moved with greater confidence, knowing that their work and dignity were valued and protected. Aaliyah felt a sense of pride in being part of a team that upheld these standards, and she understood that her own actions had contributed to a positive shift in the workplace environment. During a brief break, Aaliyah sat quietly in the staff area, reflecting on the growth she had experienced. She thought about the fear, anger, and humiliation she had felt the previous day and how she had transformed those emotions into strength and determination. She realized that challenges in life often revealed inner strengths that might otherwise remain hidden. By facing adversity with calmness and courage, she had discovered a deeper sense of self-respect and resilience. The manager approached her again during her break. "Aaliyah, I want you to know that the resort is considering recognizing your actions formally," he said. "Your professionalism and courage set a standard for everyone here. We want to ensure that your efforts are acknowledged." Aaliyah felt a wave of gratitude. She had never sought recognition for her actions, but the acknowledgement reinforced that standing up for oneself with dignity and professionalism mattered. It was a reminder that courage and integrity were noticed, even in challenging circumstances. As the evening approached, Aaliyah prepared to finish her shift. The restaurant had returned to a calm, relaxed atmosphere, and she felt a sense of accomplishment. She had navigated a difficult day, maintained her professionalism, and strengthened her sense of self-worth. Walking through the dining area one last time, she noticed the subtle smiles and nods of appreciation from guests and colleagues alike. It was a quiet but meaningful acknowledgement of her strength, patience, and composure. Reflecting on the incident with Miranda, Aaliyah recognized that the experience had changed her perspective. She understood that life would continue to present challenges and difficult people, but she had developed the confidence and resilience to face them without compromising her dignity. She realized that the true measure of strength was not the absence of fear or difficulty but the ability to maintain composure and assert boundaries in the face of adversity. That night, as she walked home, Aaliyah felt a profound sense of peace. The confrontation with Miranda, while difficult and emotionally taxing, had become a defining moment in her life. She had demonstrated courage, professionalism, and self-respect, and in doing so, she had grown stronger. She knew that the lessons she had learned would continue to guide her in both her personal and professional life, helping her navigate challenges with confidence and grace. In the days that followed, the resort continued to implement subtle changes to ensure the safety and respect of staff. Policies regarding guest behavior were reinforced, and staff received additional training on handling difficult situations. Miranda's privileges at the resort were restricted, and she was reminded that her actions had consequences. Aaliyah observed these changes with quiet satisfaction, knowing that her actions had played a part in creating a safer, more respectful work environment. Aaliyah also noticed a change within herself. She carried herself with increased confidence and calm assurance. The memory of the confrontation no longer brought fear or anger but served as a reminder of her resilience and inner strength. She understood that dignity and self-respect were not things given by others but qualities she could claim for herself. Each day, as she moved through the restaurant, she did so with the knowledge that she had faced adversity and emerged stronger, wiser, and more confident. Her colleagues continued to look to her as an example of professionalism and courage. They admired the way she had handled the confrontation and were inspired by her ability to maintain composure under pressure. Aaliyah felt a sense of responsibility to continue modeling these qualities, understanding that her actions could influence and encourage others. She embraced this role quietly but with determination, knowing that her strength could have a positive impact beyond herself. By the end of the week, Aaliyah felt a sense of closure. The incident with Miranda had passed, the consequences had been addressed, and the restaurant environment had returned to a sense of normalcy. Yet the experience remained a powerful lesson in courage, resilience, and self-respect. Aaliyah knew that challenges would arise in the future, but she now had a deeper understanding of her ability to face them with dignity and calm assurance. Walking home that evening, Aaliyah felt a profound sense of accomplishment. She had faced a situation that tested her patience, courage, and professionalism, and she had emerged stronger. She had proven to herself that she could stand up for her dignity without resorting to anger or aggression, and in doing so, she had inspired those around her. The incident had become a defining moment, a testament to the power of calm assertiveness, self-respect, and inner strength. Aaliyah knew that life would continue to present challenges and difficult people, but she felt prepared to face them. She had learned that true strength came from maintaining composure, asserting boundaries respectfully, and protecting one's dignity. The experience with Miranda had shown her that courage could be quiet and steady, yet profoundly impactful. As she looked forward to the days ahead, Aaliyah carried with her a renewed sense of confidence, self-worth, and the knowledge that she had the strength to navigate any challenge with grace and dignity.